Welcome to the second Technical Advisory Group meeting for the study of the safety impacts of ethanol transportation by rail through Boston, Cambridge, Chelsea, Everett, Somerville, and Revere. Amy, I did not get a copy of the agenda. Can you give me a copy of that? Anyone I can look over with? So first thing I wanted to cover is a safety briefing, and not being familiar with the building, is there anyone from the city of Revere who could help me identify the evacuation routes? And
the main exit is off to my right here, out of the hall, down the stairs. Bottom of the stairs, you take a left and go outside. There's an additional exit, but that goes downstairs and through an office. And,
or you can take a left out this door and go to the other stairwell.
Okay.
On the other side of the building.
All right. And the nearest bathrooms, where are they located?
Use this one, chief. One to the left.
okay, there's a bathroom in there. There's a bathroom out in the hall. I don't know if it's done locked, but there's a bathroom over here. There's also a bathroom down at the basement level.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And as far as in case of emergency, can anyone who is trained in CPR please raise your hand? All right. Thank you. Can I have a volunteer to take a head count? Thank you, Ned. In addition to that, can I also have a volunteer to dial 911 in case of emergency? Thank you, Amy. Is the City Hall equipped with AEDs, fire extinguishers?
Yes, on the main floor.
Okay.
By the main entrance.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, thank you for thank you for listening to the safety briefing. Now I'm going to just have everyone go around the room so we can reintroduce ourselves. We know who's on the phone already, but like I said, my name is Paul Nelson, and I'm the project manager for MassDOT. To my left.
Ed O'Hara, Revere, concerned citizen.
Stacy Rubin, attorney at Alternatives for Communities and Environment.
John Walkie, East Boston resident, and work with Transportation for America.
Matt Frank, Chelsea City Council.
Janet Knott, with Councilor Limatina's office.
Gene Doherty, Revere Fire Chief.
David Butler, City of Everett Fire Chief and Emergency Management Director.
Rod Frazier, City of Boston Fire Commissioner.
Minka Van Busekamp, Cambridge City Councilor.
Jerry Mahoney, Assistant Fire Chief, City of Cambridge and Cambridge Emergency Management Director.
Mary Clark, Mass Department of Public Health.
Great. Behind me.
David Slagle, I'm with MassDEP, Chapter 91 group.
I'm Alvin Simonis, I'm also with MassDEP. I'm in Boston in the Emergency Response Program, coordinator of the Emergency Response Program across the state.
I'm Kingsley M.D. I'm with MassDEP Northeast Region Emergency Response.
Nick Giles, I'm with MassDEP Emergency Response on the Chief in Central Massachusetts.
I'm Roseanne Monzoni with the Chelsea Collaborative and the Chelsea Resident.
Amy Rogers, Erica Collins, DOD.
Tom Tedesco, Emergency Planning, Revere Fire.
Jay Ash, Chelsea City Manager.
Ed Faneuil, Global. Bernie Kelly, Global Company.
Tom Rainey, Sullivan Mayor's Office, Marine Security Rep.
Sullivan, Deputy Fire Chief, City of Somerville.
John Hanson, the Mass Railroad Association, for free.
Irene Novoselsky, Revere City Council President.
Nick Carter with MassDOT Planning.
Jody Ray with MassDOT Transit.
Great. Thank you all for
and
coming.
Just may add, Mayor Rizzo couldn't attend to a scheduled trip he had.
Okay. Thank you.
From Revere.
And on top of that, I want to thank the City of Revere for hosting this meeting. Besides a few technical difficulties, it looks like this room will be very, very useful for our meeting today. And I also wanted to mention that there is a attendance sheet that's going around, so please make sure that you sign in to acknowledge your attendance and just check your contact information to make sure we have it correct. So what I'd like to do is, for today's meeting, we're going to be going through a presentation that was handed out to you. So there are about 16 slides. As you can see in the meeting agenda, the major tasks that we're going to be looking at are a review of the comments received at the first Technical Advisory Group meeting, looking at some of the work that's been done to date on Task 2, which is the rail corridor conditions, and Task 3, evaluation of the impact on public safety. So let's get started and take a look at the second slide. So what I just wanted to update everyone on is we received Obviously, there was a lot of discussion at the first meeting, and we received a lot of comments afterwards, so I just wanted to talk those through. First, I just wanted to welcome the representatives from Somerville. We have expanded the study area for this to include their city, and we look forward to your participation. And if you have other questions about how the study's gone to date, I can follow up with you after that, after the meeting. The website is also now available, and we will be posting materials to it as they are translated into Spanish, so it will be available. The URL, currently you can link to it through our site, but we haven't set up the user-friendly one. It should be in process as we speak, so I've actually asked them to send me notification when it's up, but it will be www.mass.gov/massdot/ethanol safety.
So what's posted on there so far?
Right now, it's just basically it's a landing site that has information about the legislation that was passed, my contact information in case anyone has any questions, and basically I wait for the materials to be posted as we go.
Paul, would you repeat the website, please?
Sure. The address will be www.mass.gov/massdot. That's MASSDOT/ethanol safety. And I will send it out in an email to everybody on the advisory group. Okay. So,
hello, this is Kelly on the phone.
Yep.
Could you maybe email me the slides so I can follow along?
We can. Amy, do you want to see if you can do that? I'll give you the. Kelly, we're going to have to. We'll do our best to get that to you. It's going to have to be through one of the computers here at the city, but we'll give that a shot. Take the attendance list that has their email address on it. So on the third point you can see on the room comments is there's been a lot of interest in holding public outreach meetings for this study. And what I wanted to start this off with is there's been a lot of interest and a lot of excitement about holding these meetings, and a lot of people have volunteered times for these meetings. And what I just wanted to say is that there has to be a process for us setting this. We need to make sure that that the proper MassDOT personnel can be there, and so we are committed to having some of these meetings. I think some of the dates that have been discussed may not be convenient for us, but we will be able to have all the meetings that are requested. So, sure.
We only have 2 weeks to have these meetings, and it takes quite a long time to get folks out to these meetings.
Yep.
So we need you to communicate with us quickly
Yep.
and efficiently, and to agree as soon as possible so that we can bring as many stakeholders out as possible.
Absolutely.
We've already requested 2 meeting dates. It took us about 6 days to get a response from you on one of the public meetings. So we can't just turn it down overnight, and it's not fair to the community and other stakeholders who participate.
Sure, I understand. No, we, as part of this, we'll be talking about
Somebody on the four that are on the phone, please put them on mute.
All right. Well, I'd be happy to discuss those meetings. And actually, as part of it, I wanted to review the meetings that have been requested, see if we missed any that people might be interested in holding. So the meetings that have been requested so far is a neighborhood meeting in East Boston, a special briefing with the Chelsea Public Schools, a special briefing with the New England Produce Center, a joint special briefing with other business interests such as the Chamber of Commerce, Suffolk Downs, the Chelsea Healthcare Center, and the FBI, and the Spalding Rehabilitation. And finally, a joint special meeting with the Chelsea, Cambridge, and Somerville Boards of Health.
I can't hear anything.
Hi, Kelly, is that you?
Someone on the phone has not muted.
Okay. Well, I just asked that anyone on the phone that is not muted, please mute your phone. I don't know. All right. Sure. Kelly, the problem is you can't hear me because I can just speak a little louder. Kelly, is that better?
That's better. better, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think the mute button was actually pushed. So, all right. So, are there any other meetings that folks in the advisory group would be interested in having that we can talk about at this time?
Yeah, I'd like to have one in Cambridge.
Okay.
Possibly one in Everett also.
I can't hear a thing.
If folks could speak up so that the folks on the phone would have a...
Yeah, I cannot hear a thing either. Somebody is driving.
Whoever is on there's only 4 of us on the phone. Somebody doesn't know how to mute their cell phone.
Hang out, make them all dial back in, and the person who's not paying attention probably won't get back in.
This is as far as it reaches. Kelly, I'm sorry that you're having difficulties. Can you hear me? This is Paul.
I can certainly hear you,
Okay.
Paul, but I can hear whoever's driving in the background.
Okay. All right. Well, what we'll do on our side is try and speak up so that you can hear over that background noise. Okay?
Appreciate it very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
So everyone, please just remember to speak up so that they can hear you.
On your last question?
Yes.
About meetings?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to make a suggestion. We have a meeting at Global Petroleum on their site.
There's a security issue for that.
A security issue?
Yes. No, they just don't let anybody in to the site. I mean, including us.
Public officials have been welcomed.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
I don't think they have the facility.
I rail is actually really focused at the moment at the movement of the product to Revere, including Revere itself. And so, other than Mr. O'Hara desiring to come visit the facility, which I don't think is appropriate, I don't think that's necessary based upon the study protocol that's
Yeah, I would say, Ed, that these meetings are to provide information to people who want to learn more about the study. They're not necessarily meant to be fact-finding missions on different locations. So I'm more interested in the groups that we can reach out to provide information and get their feedback, because I know there's a lot of people beyond those around the table that are interested in this study.
Well, the information that we have here relative to the various trackings and so forth on site is very difficult to read and understand. And that's one of the reasons why I asked.
Okay.
It's very confusing to me as to what their plans are, where they're going to put their tracks, where the MBTA tracks are going to be abutting their property, so forth and so on. And I can't fathom it from the information that I've received. So perhaps somebody down the line can clarify it a little better, and that'll resolve my concerns.
Well, I think that's
I would volunteer to take Mr. O'Hara down to the site with Mr. Faneuil's permission to at least the rail lines, not into the facility.
Should
and let him see what it is.
Should I wear body
armor? It's been
armor?
there forever.
Should I wear body armor when I get on there?
I don't think we have to be facetious, Mr. O'Hara. All right.
I'll
I'm
take
volunteering to take you to the rail race.
Thank you.
All right.
I think
That's
that-
fair enough.
I appreciate the discussion on that. And I also think what we can do is we can provide maybe a little bit more clarity. I think part of how the ethanol trains will navigate to the facility, I believe, is within the scope of the study. So what we can do is look into more information about what the proposed track alignment is there and how the operations of the train will happen to deliver the ethanol. I think that that's within the scope of the study. So we'll talk with the railroads and with Global, if necessary, to get more information on that so that there's no confusion about that.
subject to the appropriate security precautions.
Correct.
Because as I've said, there may be certain information that is readily shared with state and federal agencies that will not be readily shared, appropriately not readily shared with the public involved.
Sure, absolutely.
See, these sites are all actually, they're overseen by the Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, and through the Coast Guard.
Okay.
So that the safety plans and the things that are on the sites now, we have to go through, the locals have to go through the Coast Guard to go through, to get to Global. So there is a process, and it's just not anybody and anybody can go through the process because the sites are supposed to be secure facilities.
Sure, I understand that.
Could Mr. Faneuil get a microphone when he responds? I don't think they can pick him up.
I apologize, I'll stand
No,
up.
no, it's not your fault.
Quietly.
I don't think,
Perhaps
We don't have
it
hands-free mic.
may be helpful to explain some of those Homeland Security procedures in the report that these facilities go through at a level of detail that's appropriate for the report and for public consumption.
I think that makes sense. I think the Commonwealth owes the population at large an understanding of what various agencies within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts do today to address various circumstances that occur in our day-to-day lives.
Okay.
And just before we move off the issue of scheduling meetings, it is very important with our compressed time frame that we get these meetings scheduled as soon as possible and get the word out as broadly as possible. Maybe some of the stakeholders could help us out by identifying times that would be available for a given venue, or get us the contact information for the venues that have been requested, and then we could start to kind of nail those down and identify slots that we could attend meetings and hold those meetings at these different areas, and do that as soon as possible.
Yes.
Are you willing to do weekend meetings?
We could talk about it if you want to propose a specific time. I ask that you kind of give us, we'll be scheduling a lot of meetings, so the more windows that you can give us for these meetings will help when scheduling them.
Can we confirm a date for the East Boston community meeting today?
Today, probably not at this meeting, though. We'll try to do it. We'll try to figure it out today. I mean, unfortunately, again, Paul is not available on
February 6th.
Okay. So if you have other alternatives, we could talk about that maybe at the end of the meeting. Otherwise, let's nail that down, by the end of today.
We don't have alternative dates, and we're wondering if somebody else from MassDOT can be present on February 6th, since that date works for so many other people.
Well, let's talk about this after the meeting. Paul is the project manager, and it's we need to have the appropriate staff at these meetings.
Which is Paul, is that what you're saying?
Paul, the project manager needs to be at these meetings.
Yes.
So if I can chime in then, I'm really troubled by an end date for a report that is so rushed that we can't even get dates scheduled for meetings. The legislature adopted this in August. Here we are in January, and we're talking about a potential major public safety issue, and we're trying to rush together a report in a 3-week period of time. I don't think it was the legislature's intention to get a rushed report. I think they were looking for a thoughtful review. And it would seem to me that we should all agree that we are going to take the time necessary to deliver a report, maybe provide the legislature with an update by a time certain as to where we are in the status of the report. I find it hard to believe that our legislators want us to give them something other than a thoughtful and well-researched report on what the public safety implications are. So I guess I asked MassDOT what your objection would be to setting a new date for a final report to be done and communicating to the legislature as to why we decided to extend the date.
Well, it's a requirement of legislation. It's not within our jurisdiction, our purview to extend that date. It is something that we could request. I think it would have to be approved, passed by the legislature, and I think we have been doing the analysis on this study for some time. Unfortunately, with the holidays, the addressing fully. And if we need to continue to have public meetings to discuss the report and the findings after the due date, I think that's something that we could consider. And I think that's something we would be happy to do.
Well,
Yes.
These are all very good points. However, I think since we have a short timeline, this advisory group has specific tasking that we have to get our input in to DOT because they're going to make this report at their deadline. So if we want to, make our recommendations on mitigations for public safety and some of these other things, I think we need to focus on that. As far as the meetings go, if Paul personally, if you can't make the meeting, my recommendation is you send a representative. This has to go down, people have to be informed, and all of these communities shouldn't have to rotate around your personal schedule. There's other people on this team that work for you that can provide the information to the community. I understand that you can't make them all, but other people certainly should be able to fill in for you. The other thing is, we need to get these meetings scheduled. I think that offline, if people have not emailed a couple of dates to Paul, if you have, then, basically you got to answer the mail on that, right? So you got to come up with a schedule and answer everybody and get that out, because it does take a long time to get this information out, and you don't want people to say, I didn't know about the meeting, and then you're going to have a big uproar in the local community. I know in our community of East Boston, a lot of people are very interested in this, and they certainly want to attend the meeting. So the sooner we get that message out, the better it is for them. And last is, on these safety concerns, these are things that have to be discussed, and we have to look to develop recommendations, mitigate risk, things of that nature. So I would suggest that we kind of move along with our tasking that we're given by the legislature and try to get the best answers that we can by the deadline.
And notwithstanding that, I have 18 days before you're going to put out a report, and I have received no technical information that gives me any further insight than I had before this began. This would not be the first time that a state agency missed a legislative deadline. There is a huge difference between intentionally or ignoring a deadline and needing additional time in order to make sure that the study can be done well and that the communities that are going to be most affected have an ability to contribute to the discussion that's taking place. I have no confidence that I'm going to have the ability to analyze all the information that's going to be presented and give any thoughtful impact back in order for you to include in a report that's due in 18 days.
And one more thing, after the deadline is February the 8th, is that right? Am I correct?
February
9th, February 9th. And after conversation with your office, I understand your intention is to have public hearings after you issue your report. That doesn't make too much sense to me, because it's a done deal then. I hate to use that term, but if you issue your report and then have public hearings, how can the public get involved? It's a dead issue. So I'm a little concerned about the time frame also.
Well, we're committed to continue this discussion beyond the report. I think is what I meant to communicate to you, not that we would only hold public meetings after the report was issued. I'd like to finalize a series of meetings on this by the end of this week. So if you can provide information to me, any member of the advisory group, on possible times, we can put together a schedule for some public involvement, and that can be done by the end of this week. Including,
So the end of this week is
how are we
tomorrow.
going to do it?
It is.
The end of this week is tomorrow. You're going to communicate this beginning next week as to the public.
Yes.
And you're going to expect the public to show up informed and able to contribute to a study to a report that you are going to be writing as they contribute to it, all within 15 days.
Correct.
That can't be what the legislature had intended. That can't be responsive to what the community's needs are, the community's concerns are, relative to this very important issue. And so issuing a report that doesn't completely address all of the issues that we have to talk about really has no value. And we're looking for a report that addresses these issues. So I have to ask you, what is the problem with going beyond February 9th? state agencies regularly miss deadlines. You have a very good reason this time as to why you would miss a deadline, because you need more time in order to provide the information required for the legislature and other agencies to review it. So I don't understand why the deadline is so magical.
Well, we're committed to the deadline. I think that you raise very important points, and I can take that to our office and find out, and raise this with them and find out what would happen if we do miss the deadline or anything like that. That is definitely a comment I understand, and I can take to our leadership at MassDOT. I just can't tell you here.
I think what we would like to do at this point is to, we will talk with the leadership at MassDOT. I think we want to continue moving ahead with the analysis and with the public involvement process, work the public involvement process as thoroughly and as quickly as possible. Again, if some of that needs to happen after February 9th, we can accommodate that, and we will make sure that the report adequately reflects that. We would like to keep moving forward with the process and with this meeting. Let's see where we end up on the report, incorporating these working group, the input from this working group, as well as the input from the public, and see where we end up and see how that works out.
I'll make one more point about the deadline. I had to cancel 2 meetings to be here today. I'm fully committed to this meeting group. But I'm running a municipality. Which is a very complicated place to run. I have meetings scheduled for the next month on very important matters that are equally as important to this. It's not fair to us, the people that you want to contribute, that we have to make these decisions about whether we're going to be here or someplace else. We're cutting this so close that it can't possibly be the product that we would all want. And so I would implore you to ask, to talk to your superiors about this and agree that the February 9th deadline is not a magical one, and that I'm not saying that we have to set a deadline that is February 9th of 2014, but we have to be realistic about what it is, the time commitment we can all make, the time to respect the schedules of people who want to give meaningful input into a very important subject of theirs, to respect those schedules, and have you have enough time to educate us so that we can make informed decisions, and then agree at the end of the day that the report has some validity. Because I'll tell you right now that a report that comes out that doesn't have validity is one that I'm going to attack here and everywhere else I can. So it's going to be counterproductive to issue a report that we haven't had an opportunity to fully contribute to and feel good about.
There's another issue, another important issue also. The legislature indicated that you would conduct an investigation. You set a date as February the 9th. The DEP has already conducted their investigation as to whether they'll issue the licenses to Global Petroleum. That's been held up until you issue your report. Once you issue your report, those licenses can very well go forward. We don't know what DEP has decided, but once you set a date of February the 9th, then Global has a right to go forward with their project, if DEP allows them to. Otherwise, the licenses are allowed. So how do you deal with that issue?
I don't think that's in the purview of the committee, sir. But I would just say, look, I agree with you guys that we need more time, but my point is this. I think that when February, when this deadline comes around, this February 9th deadline, the DOT is going to write a report, and they're going to submit the report, because that's what they keep telling us they're going to do. So we can argue about all kinds of crazy stuff and not have any valid input, or we can make input into what they're going to present on February 9th. But
That's exactly the point.
Well, they're limited.
A report, we're not going to have valuable input,
Okay.
and the community and the stakeholders that aren't here, that aren't represented on this committee, aren't going to have that same ability to provide input. The folks at the Produce Center, developers in Chelsea, businesses in Cambridge, people in other communities aren't going to have the same input. They're not on this committee. They're not going to have time to review any documents. And I have to agree with Jay.
But they're not on the committee.
This is the second meeting. We've had nothing of substance to review besides meeting notes from the last meeting.
Oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I presented a series of questions at the last meeting, and then I emailed them in. Still have not received the answer to my questions.
Correct.
So, I broached I shared the same questions with fire chief in Everett, the fire chief in Revere, and the assistant chief in Cambridge, and I think they agreed that those were questions that they would like to get the answers to also.
Yep, and we're committed to answering those questions to the best of our ability as we go forward. Be happy to. First, I just want to thank everyone for their dedication to this group. I know that it's not convenient to meet as regularly as we are. We're committed to putting forth a report that provides a lot of opportunity for the public, and that's what this committee is supposed to do. I hear you loud and clear on the schedule, and we will be bringing that back. But I'm hoping that we can move on to the next parts of the presentation so that everyone has a good opportunity to take a look at it. Is that okay? Do you mind if I move forward? And I also want to recognize that DEP is here on the committee, and that there's actually 4 people representing DEP. Did I get that right today? So they are hearing what we're working through in regards to the licenses that they are responsible for issuing. So they're here hearing feedback.
I understand, but you didn't answer my question. If February the 9th, you issue your report, that's a shut-off date. My understanding that DEP was ordered by the legislature not to issue the licenses until you had hearings. At that time, when the hearings are complete, then DEP must issue the licenses or deny them. So that's the question I'm asking you.
Well,
what good is all of this if they're going to issue the licenses?
And I don't know if they're going to issue the license or not.
I don't either.
I just know that the legislation says they cannot issue them until the report is submitted.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't force them to submit it the day the report is...
Well, the DEP's report's complete. They've already made up their mind. They conducted their investigation. Either they're going to issue the licenses or not. It's held up by the legislation that was passed, giving DOT an opportunity to make your presentations. And on February the 9th, they can issue the licenses. So all of this is for naught. That's what I'm concerned about.
That's an issue that we can discuss with DEP and get an answer on what their expectation is for once they receive the report.
Well, my understanding is that the licenses are held up because of DOT's hearings. They were held up. Your report's complete. DEP's report's complete, whether you issue the licenses or not. I don't know. You people know what you're going to do. But as soon as this is complete, you're mandated to issue the licenses if you're going to issue them. If you do issue them, what are we wasting our time here for? They're going to go forward with their project. That's the issue I'm concerned about. We've got to figure out a way. This has to be prolonged somehow by someone in authority to not issue the licenses on the 9th when they're required to do so. How do we stop it?
Could I just say something?
Say anything you want.
Okay. The licenses are not final. What we have to produce is a draft document of what our decision is going to be on that license. We'll also be working with inside the agency when we see the report. So I don't think if you are saying this study ends on the 9th, on the 10th, we're going to shoot something out. We'd like to see the study as well before we make our decision as far as our written determination in our draft form.
Well, wasn't the legislation that was passed, didn't it indicate that you are not to issue the licenses until the hearings are complete? So, I mean, I think it's in the legislation, that the legislation was passed by the legislature. If you read it carefully, I think it says that you have to now issue your licenses, or not issue them.
We would issue a draft.
A draft? What does a draft mean?
It would be our preliminary decision on how we are looking at the licensing. Is it an approval or a denial? Those go out to all the parties that have commented during the comment period, and any of those parties who do not like our decision can appeal that license within 21 days of that draft going out.
Is a draft a final?
No.
It is not a final.
The draft's a draft.
You have the ability to comment on it.
For 21 days. The public is...
You can appeal that draft.
The public can appeal.
Anyone who has commented...
That's a step backwards as far as I'm concerned. After all of this for 2 years, that's a step backwards. You're giving us 21 days, no time at all. So, I mean, I don't know how you're gonna resolve this, but I don't like the looks of it or the sound of it at all. Especially when DOT really has no authority whatsoever.
Paul, didn't you say we were also going to have meetings after that supposed deadline of the report? You were going to have additional meetings?
Yes,
So,
yes.
so your final findings wouldn't be reported until you would have the other meetings, correct? Or at least at the legislature. I understand the law, don't tell me no.
Say that again.
You specifically said you were having additional meetings even after the advisory report, and then the city manager from Chelsea asked you, well, how can you do that? And have the input of having a written report. But you've obviously planned out some other meetings beyond the actual day.
Well, we're committed to the safe transportation of goods and people in the Commonwealth.
Correct.
And if part of that discussion is an extension of the ethanol discussion, we're committed to being involved in that.
So DEP
facilitating
wouldn't be
discussions.
notified of your final report, excluding this advisory report, that your findings are due for the safety of the Commonwealth until such time as you have these additional meetings, correct?
Well, well, we're shooting to deliver the report at the deadline set by the legislature. But before that, we are committed to having public process to allow people to provide comments on the draft document so that they can be incorporated into the final that's delivered to what is delivered to the legislature. So we are committed to having a public process outside of this technical advisory group.
So I'm assuming DEP may not act totally until that final process is through.
That would be my assumption.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So it's not 21 days.
All right.
No, that was,
You have your deadline on the preliminary, your draft report.
for our draft license.
Correct.
So once they chew on the report and come up with our decision, that gets mailed out. That's the 21-day comment period or appeal period.
An appeal period.
Correct.
Okay, so I'd like to move on to the next slides because we do have some material to cover. If anyone has any other questions or concerns with this, you can either email me or talk to me after the meeting, okay? All right, thank you. Now, the next slide, what we'll be reviewing now is item number 4, which is the rail corridor conditions. And that starts with the slide showing the study area and the potential routes. So if you turn the page here, it's here. All right, so just to remind everyone, these are the potential routes that we looked at the first meeting. There are 4 potential routes that ethanol is likely to be transported on to reach the global facility. Starting at the middle left, is the Worcester commuter rail line utilizing the Grand Junction to then cross through Somerville into Everett, Chelsea, Revere, and East Boston. The other 3 lines are the Fitchburg commuter rail line, the Lowell line, and the Haverhill line, all which could transport ethanol, turning at the BET and then going into Everett, Chelsea, and Revere. And what I wanted to do, if you can see on the next slide, I apologize that the text is small, but the next slide shows an overview.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Confirmation. So the ExxonMobil facility is kind of adjacent to the global facility. Is that true?
There are other facilities adjacent to it. I don't know if it's an ExxonMobil facility.
Exxon, did you ask that?
ExxonMobil?
No, it's in Everett.
In Everett, okay. So, okay, I don't know that we want to completely focus on global, or we want to focus on ethanol transport in total.
Well, if it's in Everett, it would still use the corridors identified.
We're on the rail corridor. We're talking about the whole rail corridor.
Okay, so there's no other way,
Yeah. No.
So just to be clear, there's no other routing that can be taken. My understanding is, from what I know, there are only 2 routes. One from Ayer going through Lynn and Chelsea, Lynn and Salem, wherever it goes, and the other one through Cambridge, Boston, and so forth. There are only 2. There's no way to reroute these trains. There are only 2 corridors.
Well, we're actually looking at 4 corridors, which are shown.
Well, into global?
Well, there's
only 2.
Basically, there's only 1 route into the global, but we're looking at
throughout the whole state.
The other routes that go through those.
Through the other cities and towns?
And Lynn is not a route.
But no, the tracks go through there, but they can come from there.
They go beyond it. They're not coming in from Lynn.
Well, I know that. But can they come that way? That's my question.
Well, and actually, if you look at the next slide, what I wanted to do, because there were some questions about why these routes were selected, And what the next slide shows is the statewide freight rail network. And this shows the rail lines color-coded by freight operation. And just basically the most important ones are in red is the CSX rail system, and then in brown is the Pan Am Southern routes.
Paul,
Yep.
can you email this out as well afterwards? It's very hard to see.
Yep.
It'll be on the website.
Yep, we can put it up there. And what you'll see is that there are two major routes. The two major routes that most freight, including ethanol, would take into the state are entering on the western end of the state on both the red and brown routes, and they both parallel roughly. The Mass Turnpike parallels the red route, which is CSX, and Route 2 parallels the brown route, which is the Pan Am Southern route. And so what you can see following the brown route in is that after Ayer, it can go down on the Fitchburg line, or it can go across into Lowell and down on the other two routes that are also identified. So that would be the three routes across the northern system.
What two routes, the other two routes, what are they? What routes are they? What towns or cities?
They come in from Lowell and from Lawrence.
Lawrence, so where?
They come down through Lowell, Lawrence.
Lawrence.
I can get you, I mean, there's a number of
Comes
cities.
into Lawrence,
and
but
towns
how
that
do
go
they get into the site? You're telling me that...
So once they come down those routes, pretty much every single route pivots around the Boston Engine Terminal, which is located in Somerville, adjacent to 93, and then goes in on
So from Lawrence, it ends up going through Somerville, is that what you're saying?
Yes. And then it would then, at the Boston Engine Terminal, go out on the Newburyport Rockport line, which goes through Everett, Chelsea, and Revere, and then it would back onto the siding to access the global facility. One thing I want to note is there's the remainder of the Newburyport Rockport line is not included in the study area because it is on the statewide map. You can see that there's no connection to the remainder of the freight system, so they wouldn't be coming from a different customer into that route, so that's why we didn't include it. The other one is the other lines in Boston that are south, basically the Attleboro-Stoughton line, which is the northeast quarter. Fairmont and the Old Colony lines were not included because of the longer routing around there, that it's very unlikely that any ethanol headed for the global facility would go that way. All right, and what I can do is I can provide a more detailed description of this on the website as part of task one.
Paul, just a quick question. After the train gets to Revere, how far north on the track would it go, depending on the number of cars in the ethanol train?
The northern limit on the Rockport line that I understand is Revere Street, the Revere Street Bridge. And that's where the red line on the attached maps. And
Basically like a mile is what it comes out to.
I think so, yes.
So that's what this line...
That's the end of that red is Revere Street.
Okay.
And Jody, is it a physical constraint that doesn't let them go any further north?
No, I think if the ethanol train was to come out of Boston, or out behind Boston Engine Terminal, it comes out on the normal eastbound track, which is the outbound track heading towards Rockport Newburyport. It only has to go one train length by the switch to the East Boston branch to back in. If it was to come out on the other track, which is Boston, it would have to go up to the crossovers between the two mainline tracks behind the Wonderland Dog track, and that would have it go up towards the Revere Street Bridge as a crossover and came back in again. So what we did was we took a look at the most likely route would say we'd never go that far, we'd never use those crossovers, but because it was potential, we included it.
Let me ask you this then. You mentioned 60 rail cars now, but there's nothing to prevent them from getting 80 or 100 or 120 rail cars if they have the room on their site. So when we're talking about 60 rail cars going to Revere Street, the people have no confidence as to whether then there'll be 80 rail cars, depending if they upgrade their facilities and they have room, to 100 rail cars, to 120 rail cars, which pushes you further down beyond Revere Street into heavily populated neighborhoods. So the public doesn't know. Can they stand up and tell us we'll never bring in more than 60 rail cars at a time? I don't think you'll get them to do that. But these things are important. So we talk about 60 rail cars, it could be 120 rail cars next year. Now you're further down the line through heavily densely populated areas. These are things that have to be answered. If they want to stand up and say, okay, we will never have more than 60 rail cars at one time, that would be an interesting result, but they're not going to do that. So we have to consider the fact that there could someday could be 120 rail cars.
There are limitations on how long a freight train can be, because there's a time limit on how long they can have the gates down at the public grade crossing. So, for all intents and purposes, if you could have 100 cars instead of 60, but that's about the limit. About a mile is about as long as the train can possibly get.
So just
once you get to Revere,
though,
you're leaving the densely populated area and entering into the marshland, so that if they, even though they've never talked about more than 60 cars, that I've ever heard them mention, or anybody else for that matter, it would bring you out into the extension of the track, or the extension of the train, the lengthening of that train would put you out into the marshland, as opposed to the more heavily populated areas around the district.
Well, I appreciate the discussion on this, and I don't think it would be that much extra work to look at theoretically what 100 car, if that's the limit of what a train could be, how much additional territory that involves along that line. So we can extend that a little bit. Yep, yeah, we can extend it along there and include that in the analysis.
We don't have any answer from them. There could be 100. Then
what it sounds like is that's the ceiling of how long it could be, given how trains are transported.
So now we're talking 100 ethanol trains coming into Revere. That's what we're talking about.
Well, we're
possibility.
Confirm with the Rail and Transit Division what the maximum train length could be per the gate downtime at grade crossings, and then we could base our upper bound analysis on that length.
If I may.
Yep.
The global sidings can accommodate so many cars.
Right.
So it's not going to be 120. I don't believe they can accommodate that. When they're bringing them in through that East Boston switch, they come down. There's going to be at least 2, maybe 3 sidings. So they have to be able to accommodate the whole train into those sidings. So it's not, I don't expect it to be more than 100 or 120. They've talked in the past to us 60 to 80. And I believe there's limits even on the locomotives that are bringing the freight trains itself, based on the weight.
Okay.
But you're the chief. They're the owners of the site. You're the chief. I appreciate what you're saying. I hope you're right. But they own the site. You can't control how many trains are going to come in there.
Nobody can other than the federal transportation. You understand
That's
that,
right.
the railways understand that?
Ed, I just want to interject.
I don't think so.
I think what we'll do is we'll confirm with the Rail and Transit Division at MassDOT what the longest length can be, because there is an upper limit on that, and that is the distance we'll go for that, okay?
Paul,
Yes.
a question from Stonewall. Those pushing areas is the Boston engine terminal, right?
Yep.
Legally, how long can those cars be left on the track before they move?
So it's my understanding that with ethanol trains, they're actually scheduled to keep moving. They don't,
They can't be parked there overnight?
Right, Jody, is that correct? That generally, for safety purposes, ethanol trains are scheduled to move?
But there's not room to store a 60-car train behind Boston Engine Terminal. You would be blocking one of the main lines that the commuter rail trains use all the time. It's just not, the track's not long enough. Especially Fitchburg to the Newburyport line is the longest distance, but that's probably 25 cars. So 60 cars are close to fitting in that location. So they would have to, once they came down on whatever line they came in on, they'd have to make the turn and get all the way to East Boston Ranch to get clear of the commuter rail traffic.
And that's one thing we'll look at further. There's all of these routes have heavy passenger traffic during the day. So any of the freight trains cannot conflict with the passenger movement. So that's what would keep them from parking it. The only place where they wouldn't have a conflict with passenger rail is that East Boston branch that accesses from the Newburyport line directly to the global site. So that's where any storage would have to be of cars. Did you have a question?
Yeah, are these rules or regulations that say the ethanol train must be in continuous movement, or are you just saying in general that's what they do? There's a difference between in general that's what they do,
sure,
and whether there's a rule.
Sure. Jody, do you know if it's a rule or
a federal rule? It's in general. I mean, trains have to stop for a lot of different reasons, so there's a potential that they would, but they would not purposely schedule to have the thing sit
Right, but I mean, I think we have to be careful what statements are made, right? So if we make a statement that the ethanol train must continuously be in transit, if that's not really true, then don't say that, because now you're misleading people to think that it's not ever going to park in my city, right? So if there's no rule that says it has to be continuously in transit, then we shouldn't be telling people that, regardless of what the normal operations are, because there's no rule saying that they can't do that. I mean, we're going to stick with what can be done and what can't be done. Same thing with limitations. If there's a rule or there is some limitation on how long the train can be, that's what we tell people. It might, if it's 180 cars, and that's it.
Yep, okay. I think that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. And what I'll do is I'll ask you to move on to the next slide, which shows the number of tracks, the speed, and switch locations along the corridors. So this is part of task 2, where we're looking at the physical condition of the rails. And what it's labeled, each corridor is labeled here, and what you'll see is that there are generally 2 rails along the corridors, and the numbers alongside show where there is more than 2. And there are a few cases where there are 3, and a few cases where there are 4. And in addition to that, there's a range of speeds that are available, or speed limits on those routes, but that they are temperamental within the route. So you'll see that on Corridor 1, there are curves that require speeds as low as 25 miles per hour, but there are also straightaways where, with the condition of the rail, the trains can travel up to 80 miles per hour. It's not likely that they would, but it's good to know what the existing speed restrictions are. And then along Corridor 2, it's 10 to 50 miles an hour. Corridor 3, 35 to 70. And along the shared corridor, it's 25 to 70. So, Amy, you looked into this. Most of the speed limits are due to grade crossings and curves, correct? Okay. So anywhere where there's a straightaway that is not near any at-grade crossings are where the trains are available to go the fastest. So generally speed is an important thing to consider when looking at safety, so I think that's something we need to keep in mind moving forward.
I have a question. Is there either an industry standard or a federal regulation with respect to how frequently rails are inspected for their quality?
Yes, there's a bunch of different levels of inspection, and it's all regulated, and it's all based on...
But there is actually a regulation that spells out...
Yes. And on the speeds, one thing to keep in mind is that the speeds are, what Paul's mentioned, the speed for the trains to travel on those tracks, but the freight train speeds are less than passenger train speeds. So the maximum freight train speed on all those tracks that Paul talked about is 40 miles an hour.
Okay. That's huge. So you don't let this get out with these speeds here. If what you're saying is true, that the freight trains can't ever go more than 40
Is that a freight train speed limit? Is that based on conditions or the amount of freight being hauled, or is that a law that says you can't go more than 40?
It's the Federal Railroad Administration sets limits based on the quality of the track, the way it's maintained. And so you have to if you maintain to a high level, you can raise the speed of trains. However, the tracks in question here, the speed is already established at 40. So even if we maintain it higher to get higher passenger train speeds, we don't raise the freight speed at the same time.
So that they have a 40 mile per hour maximum freight.
40 mile an hour maximum authorized speed for freight trains.
All right.
Well, I have a question on side tracks now. Now, side tracks, especially Cambridge and Somerville, aren't there side tracks where these trains may arrive early before the MBTA lines shut down, and therefore they're placed on side tracks? And if they're placed on side tracks, that means commuter rails are continually going beside them. Isn't that a fact? Otherwise, if these trains are coming in and they come too early, when Global Petroleum went before the City of Revere Conservation Commission, they specifically said through their attorney that these trains would be arriving from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning because the MBTA line shut down. Yet today, today, and since I can remember, when I get involved in this, there are commuter rails running until 1 o'clock in the morning. So I'm a little confused. They said, global, between 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. when the NBT lines shut down. That's when they pull in and they start backing in. But the commuter rail is running until 1 a.m. in the morning. So is their intention to continue to back their trains in while the commuter rails are passing these monsters when they're only 15 feet apart? So these are questions I'd like to know.
Are you sure you're not confused with the transit for the regular blue line that say they run till 1?
I
live
on Revere Beach Boulevard, and I
don't have a
see
schedule beyond that.
Well, the commuter rails are going from Boston towards Lynn until 1 o'clock in the morning.
So, Mr. O'Hara, one of the things I want to point you to is on the next slide, which is the operational summary for it. We've included the starting and ending time for all MBTA passenger movements, and below that we've basically. I apologize. I can read you through it, but
I can't read it.
Along each line there's differing times based on the MBTA's passenger schedule for when there are no passenger trains. So on the Fitchburg line between 12:20 in the morning and 6:36 in the morning, there are no passenger trains. So that is the likely freight window along the Fitchburg line.
What do you mean passenger? You mean but they're empty?
No, there's no passenger trains. We looked at both the scheduled MBTA trains and all of what are called deadhead moves, anything to shuffle the trains around the system, either send them out to the terminal station and bring them in. So we looked at all of those moves where it's passenger rail vehicles, whether they're occupied or not. And the breaks in service are listed on this slide, but I can read them to you because they are small. So on the Fitchburg line, the window is between 12:20 in the morning and 6:36 in the morning.
12:20 in the morning.
Yep, and 6:36 in the morning. On the Worcester line,
They're shut down.
That is when there are no MBTA trains or Amtrak trains running.
It's used for freight.
Tonight.
At that time.
Right.
It's open for freight.
Right.
Tonight, I will take a picture of a commuter rail train at 1 o'clock going by where I live. Every single night until 1 o'clock. So I could see them. There's 6 cars, commuter rails, that go by. 5 or 6. It depends. Some is 4, some is 5, some is 3,
Well,
some is 6.
and the times vary based on line, so let me just finish.
Yeah,
So on the Worcester line, it's between 1:30 in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning, a smaller window. On the Lowell line, it's 12:22 in the morning to 5:45 in the morning. And on the Haverhill line, it's between 11:23 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And on the Rockport, it looks like all trains are off there, out of the study area after 11:21. So between 11:21 and 6:03, there's no MBTA train operations. So
unless there's no freight lines coming through, and they may use or deadhead their trains. That's a possibility. But they will not schedule any commuter traffic during those times if there's a scheduled freight line coming
Will
through.
not. So they're doing it now and they're going to change. That's a different story.
Well, I'm going to defer to Jody on this. If he could just help us.
Well, passenger trains and freight trains go by each other all the time. And the times that Paul's talking about is in this study area. So a train that leaves Boston tonight at 12:10 a.m. heading for Fitchburg will be outside this study area at 12:26 or whatever Paul said. However, it's going to pass probably 3 or 4 freight trains on its way to Fitchburg. One of those could be an ethanol train coming in, heading for this terminal. It just won't pass while it's in this study area.
Okay.
So, but freight trains and passenger trains share the tracks all the time. There's no prohibition against that. They're constantly going by each other at various places along the trip, all the way up to Fitchburg, or all the way to Haverhill.
The issue I'm trying to make here is that these trains, according to their presentation, Global's presentation, will not come into the tracks into Revere until after 11 p.m. Okay? And now when they bring them in, they're going to back them into their site. They'll have from 11 p.m. until 5 a.m. to do that. What I'm saying to you is the commuter rail is still running until 1 o'clock in the morning. That's all I'm trying to, otherwise, when they made that statement, everybody assumes the MBTA tracks are shut down. There's no commuter rail at all between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. That's not true, because there is commuter rail.
The MBTA tracks are never shut down.
Thank you. That's all I'm saying. So it causes another problem of safety. That's where I'm coming through. If they're going to back their trains in with no commuter rails coming around, passing them, that's one thing. But when they are passing them, when they're backing up into their site, that's another thing. These trains are only 15 feet apart when they pass each other. So that's a major safety issue as far as I'm concerned.
Right, and Ed, I think you bring up a good point. Now, what can we look into as part of this study to help address those questions? I think that what we can do is we can look at the agreements between the railroad, the freight railroad, and the MBTA as far as their operations are concerned. We can look at how the dispatching is done for freight trains and for passenger trains. And we can look at some of the standard procedures for ensuring that freight trains and passenger trains can operate simultaneously on the same lines without causing any sort of crash. Jody, would you feel that there's information on that we could share with the committee? Okay.
I would say that should be part of the study. That's good information. But I think in all this, Mr. O'Hara brought up a good point. Is there, will there be opportunity, or will the freight operators be allowed to side large amounts of ethanol at various locations in the study area, other than their own location? A question was brought up by Mr. O'Hara last time and not answered, and he brought it up again right now. I think that's a good question.
Okay.
Are they allowed to store it someplace else on a siding that's not on their property?
Well, that's something that we can pursue with Global and request to the degree that they are able to share with us what are their practices for scheduling, for bringing these trains in. If they said, and I wasn't there, I didn't hear, bringing these trains in between 11 and 6. Yes, there are operations on, the end time and start time for the commuter rail operations on these different lines is different. As you can see, on the Rockport line.
You can't see anything in these things. You can see it, I can't see it.
Okay, we'll do.
It's okay, I can't either.
Thank you.
We'll do one slide per page next time. But on the Rockport line, the last train is out of the study area by about 11:20.
Rockport line meaning what?
Meaning the line.
What line? The one where the trains are backed up to Revere Street, is that what you're talking about?
Talking about the eastern
I beg your
line.
pardon?
Yes, eastern line that serves the Rockport and Newburyport.
Well, I'll tell you what, you come to my place where I live in Revere Beach, I'll give you a beer, you can sit there, we'll both watch these commuter rail trains going by.
You throw pizza in.
Pizza.
Not tonight.
Yep.
There's another issue that was brought up.
Hold on a second, Jody, can you repeat that?
You're not, for the basis of this report, you're not studying a particular window between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. You're studying the full day.
Right, right.
Yep.
So it doesn't, if the ethanol train was to show up at 11 o'clock in the morning, 11 a.m., to do the same move between the two rush hours, theoretically, it could probably fit, it could probably work. So the report's not based on a particular midnight window of opportunity. It's a 24-hour day.
Well, I'm only referring to their original presentation, you see. I have to go by what they say to the general
But this
public.
report doesn't do that. This report looks at everything.
Right, and all we're going over here is just to provide a better understanding of how the trains are operating now. But it is possible that the trains could go through in the middle of the day between the peak hours. And what we'll do is we'll take a look at how the freight trains interact with the passenger trains to make sure that they are safe to enter, that they don't conflict with passenger movements, and the other procedures that are followed to ensure the safe transport.
We should also note that these are general times that are listed here due to scheduling conflicts or whatever it may be. the commuter rail train might pass outside of this time
Right.
period, but that's all their operations and
Right.
something they take into consideration.
Before we get off the, go ahead.
Two quick questions.
Yep.
When the train itself, I understand the situation with who owns the tracks and so forth. When the train itself is underway, who owns that train? Does Global own it, or is there a carrier? Is there a company?
It's the freight rail operator.
Pan Am Southern.
No, wait a minute. The ethanol is still owned by the shipper.
That's true.
The shipper.
Yeah.
It has not arrived, so it belongs to the shipper.
Right.
Transportation belongs to Pan Am because they're the ones moving it. It's on, for most of this ride, it's going to be on MBTA product, so that's where it comes down. But the actual product inside, the tank cars, belongs to the shipper. Now, I don't know who the shipper is. The shipper could be Global on the other end, too. I don't know that, but whoever the shipper is, they own the product of the rides.
My second question is, to what extent has any consequence modeling been done to come up with scenarios that if X happened at this location, at this time of day, this is the worst case scenario. If Y happened at this time of day, at this location, this is the worst case scenario. Because from a safety perspective, that to me is one of the fundamental things that should be involved here, is some independent consequence modeling done by a reputable firm that can come in and say, if you had a derailment in Revere at 2 o'clock in the morning, this is what you'd be faced with. If you had a derailment, you had an accident in Cambridge at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, this is what you'd be faced with. And I think, the task of this committee is to come up with safety recommendations. I think that's a fundamental piece of information that we need. And I think it goes back to Mr. Asher's point that, the deadline of February 9th, I appreciate what the legislation states, but I think the deadline, it goes back to the deadline being somewhat unrealistic to compile substantive information.
I would say, though, that could be part of our report also, that we don't feel we have enough
Absolutely,
time.
that'd be done, absolutely.
That more time be given.
Absolutely.
And does MassDOT have the capability of doing that kind of modeling?
I don't believe that we do.
I would say no. I don't work for MassDOT, but I would say no.
They'd have to hire somebody.
Who would have to hire?
They, or whoever's going to pay for the modeling.
Yeah,
would hire them.
Do you want to do it?
If I had my way, I'd make them.
Oh, do you have a question?
No, I was just going to say that's why we're supposed to tackle in section 3, based on the scope of work.
Right, but I think that the specific thing of the specific task consequence modeling is really beyond our capabilities at DOT.
So I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I think it's fundamental to the discussion in the big picture of what the community's concerns are.
Okay.
I know it's fundamental to my concerns from the perspective of public safety.
And I think what the report can do is really identify those issues, identify the concerns related to what are the key, can identify sort of a need for a risk management assessment, but it cannot be a risk management assessment, just because of we can't do a detailed risk scenario assessment in this report.
Exactly, but I think as the commissioner said, I think the report could say, and I'll go on record right now saying it should say, that one of the recommendations is consequence modeling needs to be done.
I think that's something that we can certainly identify in the report.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Beck?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. Typically, these studies are done, these risk assessments, but also it's common for the railroads to come in and to do a simulation, a mock drill, say, and they put together, along with, they invite the local fire departments and first responders to how to handle this drill. So it's not uncommon for that to happen, and I would expect that some of the fire officials here today have already done that.
I have in front of me here, rail risk analysis factors. Is that what you're referring to?
I don't know if you have it.
It's right here. I have it in my hand. From the Federal Railroad Administration Rail Hazmat Routing Rule fact sheet, where the railroads are supposed to be doing all of these things that you just mentioned. But you're not, nobody seems to be aware of it.
Deputy Mahoney's talking about specific sites and areas. What would be the
No, I'm
worst case
referring to what
scenario?
he said. I understand what the deputy
Yeah,
said.
the railroad does that, and we've already met with them, and
Well, what were the findings, though, if they did it? Isn't the public entitled to know what the findings are after they do the rail risk analysis factors? Shouldn't the general public be aware of it?
I guess you'd have to ask them.
Ask the
Ask
ask them?
that paper, yeah.
Oh.
Well, if there has been a sort of a hazard response, if there's hazard response plans that Global has, I think we would appreciate having information on what those response plans are. Again, whatever you are able to share with us, what hazard response plans you have, and what is the content of those plans, and what have you done working with the municipalities in the study area to implement, to drill, to test, and then I think that's one of the most basic things that people here in the room are really looking for, is understanding what is the preparation for those kind of hazards, those kind of scenarios, and what is the preparation for those.
If I may then.
We can't develop a response plan until we know what the consequences are. So we need the consequence study to be done so we can develop a response plan from our perspective.
What do you mean a consequence? An
We have to know what the consequences of a release or an incident involving these trains is going to have in the area that it happens in. It's very similar to what we did over in Everett relative to LNG. We had extensive consequence studies done that if this happens, this is what you can expect to be the result, and now you develop a response plan based on what the consequences are going to be. But if we don't know what Chief Mahoney asked, we don't know what we're responding to.
Okay, and no city has done that yet.
You're not going to get a municipality. No, there are. These studies tend to be fairly sophisticated engineering models, but I've seen studies that have been done compared with actual incidents that have taken place, and they tend to be pretty spot on.
Okay, all right.
But most of those...
You're talking a, I think you two gentlemen would agree, you're talking, getting probably for this situation, a nationally recognized engineering firm to come in.
And it may be somebody that Pan Am or the rail line would be at bat for.
Okay. I'm sorry. If we have an example of that, for example, with the LNG terminal, it would be helpful, I think, to see both the analysis of the consequences and a copy of the response plan, just as an example of the kind of thing that we're talking about.
Even just if it becomes part of the conclusions of this report, just to point to it as a reference would be helpful, if it's able to be shared. So, Ed, did you have a...
I just want to know that Global has always cooperated with the various safety departments throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And so that would have always been our continued expression of interest to make sure that these are the fire departments that express an interest. I can't speak for rail, but I've spoken privately to rail, and I think MassDOT, which obviously works more closely with rail, can better address that. But it has never been the circumstance where Global thought that it would be ignorant of hearing from various public officials on the safety side.
So why haven't I received anything from you?
You've never had a public hearing. Never had a public hearing on this matter.
And so it would have been, and still continue to be, our express interest to make sure that the safety officials are satisfied that at least in training has been done along the line for what some I think call consequent modeling. I'm not sure that's the right terminology. But I don't want someone to suggest that global, and hearing from the fire officials and the state officials working through freight, because ethanol, I believe, does go through the Commonwealth today, and other hazardous materials, or whatever one wants to call it, is carried by rail, by freight through all these communities today. So some of these fire departments have, I would suspect, some familiarity, perhaps not with the ethanol, but with other hazmats traveling along the Mass Pike or otherwise down those corridors. And you would work with them to satisfy their inquiries.
For the record, I've asked for that information, and Global has not provided that information.
That's right.
I was informed that ethanol is, once the contract is provided, it's the carrier who is responsible, and Global is not responsible for what's happening through our communities. And the comparison was made to a FedEx package, that once something is picked up in the office, it's FedEx who controls all that stuff. So, while I appreciate the fact that you'd be willing to make that present, willing to make that available, we've asked for it, you haven't made it available.
If I may.
Sure.
The example is that the rail works more closely with the state agencies on the travel of commerce by rail through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that the example that Jay uses is a fair one, but we said it is really rail who is more closely cooperating, coordinating those efforts as the product is moved through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to its ultimate destination. Global certainly with the Revere Fire Department was managing very closely its receipt and storage.
Okay, now Jay, just to clarify, is that just a consequence modeling and assessment of what would be needed, or is there something beyond that? What were you looking for?
I have no idea what the public safety implications are in the city of Chelsea, because I have no information from the company or the carrier as to what the hazards are and what the response would be to any consequence that takes place.
Okay.
It's impossible for me to contribute anything now as to what I'm looking at, because I have no information to base that upon.
Okay, so it sounds like you're talking not only about the consequence modeling, but regular information about what materials are shipped through the city.
I don't know what materials, I don't know about any materials that shipped through the city.
Okay.
And the general public doesn't know. There's never been a public hearing on this matter by Global Petroleum. Never. So the general public, the people that live here, Chelsea, Everett, and everywhere, they have no clue what their plans are, what they intend to do, how long it will take, the safety factors. We know absolutely nothing because they have refused to have a public hearing.
Let's just say that the community already has deep concern about global oil. Since 1996, the company's had 57 spills in Chelsea and Revere.
They've had more.
In 2006, they had an 18,000-gallon spill of diesel into the Chelsea Creek that evacuated the Chelsea Elementary School. And what did Global Oil say? It was a stupid mistake. So imagine what they're going to say when ethanol is blowing up in Revere and Chelsea and wherever else.
That's right.
Stupid mistake. It's going to kill hundreds of thousands of people.
That's right.
Okay, well...
If I may.
Sure.
Can you speak up so we can pick you up on the mic?
If I may. I think Roseanne's statement was a little over the top, if I may.
Well, I am going to ask the people not... we're not...
There weren't hundreds of thousands of people killed.
There were not, no. And what I'm saying is there could be, Ed.
Let me just finish. It's an example that when things happen, agencies and first responders do respond, and that circumstances are that those first responders have been appropriately trained. I think the gentleman from Everett suggested that that's what he was interested in understanding, how that would work, and I understand that. I hear it.
Yeah, I just want to ask that you not direct anything at the members of the advisory group. We're here to try and get the best safety analysis done, and I think a lot of this discussion has been really helpful. And I think that there's a lot of history to this project, and I'm really asking you to leave that behind if you can. Now, I don't mind. You're here to speak up for your constituencies, and I'm glad that you are. But I just want to ask you to focus on, if something happened, what can we do through this process to help make sure it doesn't happen again?
That's exactly my point.
Okay.
I live in in Chelsea. I don't live far from the rail lines. And I, like Mr. O'Hara, like Councilor Frank, every single night I hear the train horns. And I think to myself, God forbid that was an ethanol train that derailed. What do I do with my son and my family? How do I evacuate? How do hundreds of thousands of other people potentially affected evacuate? We're not getting that information right now, and that's the concern. I'm not saying that they put hundreds of thousands of people at risk by their past spills. What I'm saying is we're concerned going forward. How do I respond? How does everybody else respond? How does the business community respond? That's what I'm saying, Paul.
Okay.
He doesn't hear it because he doesn't live where the trains are. He doesn't hear those horns and think, God forbid someday I'm going to have to react and move my family. I do, Paul. I do every single night. Every single night I hear that train horn.
No, and we're committed to helping you do that. So I just want to make sure, as we go through this process, if you don't feel like we're able to answer your concerns or questions, you need to bring that up. But bring them up to me. Okay?
Chief, do we have an evacuation plan that's being worked on for the city now?
I believe you've asked me that in the past. Yes, we do.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
and let me say.
No, I don't mean, I was just curious. I'm glad you...
You've asked me a few times, you've said that in the newspaper, and we've responded. Ethanol, I truly understand your concerns, but you have to understand what's going through on a regular basis on normal freight. And the departments, fire departments within the area, we plan, doesn't mean that we're going to be able to totally handle a catastrophic incident, but we plan based on the rail lines and what is normally carried through, which you really wouldn't want to know. On a regular basis, stuff that comes in on the rail lines is far, far worse than an incident we may have with ethanol. And each city is dictated through the Commonwealth to develop a comprehensive emergency management plan. And within that plan, we identify all our hazards, we identify all the areas of concern or populations of concern, and what would happen in the event of some type of an incident, and how we have to evacuate, where we have to evacuate people, move in nursing home people, things such as that. So we're on a regular basis, the fire departments and emergency management agencies within the communities are looking at these on a regular basis. I can also say that we've met preliminarily with Pan-Am officials and Federal Railway Administration people. We met at Chief Butler's office in Everett, and it was Revere, Everett, Chelsea, Somerville, Cambridge, the fire departments, to talk specifically to Pan-Am about their product and what's coming down the line, and that what they can provide for us is training and scenarios and consequences. But I mean, something as this advisory committee, that would be, just as Chief Mahoney has said, this would be a recommendation that somebody's got to provide that for us. None of us are going to be able to afford it. I know that the state fire marshal has been investigating this because, as Mr. Fano said, ethanol is in the Commonwealth on a regular basis now. I mean, they have a facility. They're coming in along the Route 2 corridor. They go into Air. They're going down to Worcester. I believe it was the Weston, Westford. There's a facility, a transfer facility, where ethanol trucks are backing up to the trains and transporting out. This is a regular routine that's already happening. The state fire marshal and with DEP, DEP has developed a report of the consequences of ethanol coming within the Commonwealth. You can go on to the Department of Fire Services website, and there's a link to get this DEP report that tells about the ethanol coming in. And the fire chiefs throughout the Commonwealth have been speaking through the fire marshal as to what we have to provide and the amount of foam that we would need for a large-scale incident. Who has the foam? Where is it going to come from? So this is ongoing now. We've been doing this for 2 years, trying to get it going. And it is very difficult to get everybody together. Now, as part of this advisory, if we make additional recommendations for the impacted communities that we are here, that we represent, then, we'll do it. But there are communities that are already tasked with this. The ethanol is coming through on a regular basis. And it is going to come through here, eventually. This is interstate commerce, and the railway administration is independent of anything the state can say to them.
Well, as a general public...
Why don't you let somebody else speak?
I want to ask you a question on that subject. As the all of these meetings that you've had, the general public knows nothing about the results of these meetings. You don't report to the general public. When you also...
No, we only protect them.
No, but the people want to know.
Ed, I need to step in.
Go ahead.
I need you to bring up, if you think that providing this information is going to be helpful for the study, I think that's a very valid comment. But I don't want you to direct anything negative towards any other member of this advisory group.
I'm not.
Well, I feel like the conversation is getting a little bit heated, so I'd appreciate it if you tone it down a little bit.
I think, this is really great. This is helpful. I think this is really what, a big part of what this committee and this study needs to get at is kind of making sure that we connect the dots on understanding what are the potential consequences and working with the municipalities to ensure that the first responders are working together with the state and with local oil to have the information and the response plans in place that are necessary. So, if we can kind of lay out where we are in the different municipalities, and then what are the gaps to get to where we need to be, then I think that's a big part of what we're trying to get at.
Right. And I just want to say, these are the kind of discussions I want to be having with this group. I think it's really great that the public's able to share their concerns with the transportation of ethanol, but that we're also talking with emergency responders about the plans that have been made. And the more discussion we can have on this and being able to identify, there has been a lot of work done. Let's recognize that work, but let's also make sure that it's thorough and complete, and let's make sure to the degree that we can, that we look into it and identify places where it can be improved. So that's why I like having the discussions.
What I was going to say is what I will do is I'll give you the link to our report, and you can include it on the webpage folks are putting out there.
It's a very good report, very informative.
It's right here.
Councilor Van Buzikum gave me, this is by Shaw's?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's excellent. I mean, I just wanted to, as Chief Doherty mentioned, it states right in here, in Massachusetts, it is estimated that there are 2 to 3 ethanol unit trains traversing the state per week, as well as an ethanol barge every other day. It's already here. It's been here for quite a while.
And we've been working with the Department of Fire Services
Correct.
and the Fire Chiefs Associations and others in trying to prepare Massachusetts to first responders to respond if there is an event.
Yeah. Looking at it from the marine side, as the chief was alluding to the roadside transportation, we've been working with fire services and Coast Guard to look at the safety.
Correct.
The three of us sitting right here were instrumental in pulling that report, and that's why we're here, because we have that information. We want to make sure that it's getting out before it starts.
I'd just like to also add, the Department of Fire Services rolled out 2 training programs. One was ethanol for first responders, which has been delivered all across the state.
And that was because we whipped them into it.
Yes. But it was good.
No, right.
And the newest thing that's being rolled out is ethanol for municipal officials to
Correct.
less red truck oriented and more, how the community can plan for it. There's also, as a part of the State Emergency Response Commission, which oversees all the emergency management groups, is this ethanol subcommittee, which we're also on. And they have just released the annex to all of the state emergency response plans specifically just for ethanol, and that is now on the MEMA webpage. For every community to adopt it, to have a template to fill in the blanks about how you will deal in your community with ethanol. So all of these things.
MEMA.
So this is one of the issues where it's been remarkable about how many local and state agencies have come together to advance this issue. Because this came to us in Worcester first, because we were getting it from Albany through Worcester, through PW Railroad, and down to Motivas Terminal. So we've been working this issue for a long time, including, it's not full-blown consequence management, but we developed this idea where, as emergency management, we'll pick a facility, and then we'll use the emergency response guidebook and put our rings around it and plan for it. What we're now doing is we're taking transportation routes and treating them like they were fixed facilities. So we're putting the bands of 500 feet, 1,500 feet out of the Mass Turnpike, 290, and the rail lines as well, and using those as planning tools, which we're reaching out to the communities with as well. It's still new, it's cutting edge, but that's because there's so much going on for this stuff.
I have to jump in here that I reject the notion that just because it's happening, it should happen more. And while I have every faith and confidence in our public safety officials to be able to respond to an incident, the issue here is to prevent the incident from happening in the first place. I asked the last time, and I'll ask again, when are we going to figure out how we're going to shelter the entire city of Chelsea for a week while something burns itself out. That's the issue. I do believe that the Chelsea Fire Department and all other fire departments can get up to speed and be equipped to respond. But in this post-9/11 era, aren't we supposed to ask ourselves the ways that we've done things before, should we be doing them the same? And in this case, it seems to me that as much as I'm concerned about an accident happening, I'm concerned about a terrorist activity taking place. And what better target than 60 trains running slowly on a regular basis through critical areas of vital economic importance to the Commonwealth. I just don't understand why that is the foremost thing here, and I will note about that I and others around here continue to be concerned and disappointed that Homeland Security officials from the state are not here talking about this very thing. I'm sorry, you were a Homeland official from the state?
No.
Okay, so, did you want to interrupt?
I would just like to suggest is the Mass Emergency Management Agency has working groups on mass evacuation, mass sheltering, and they are working with local officials to push those plans and update them in the post-9/11 world.
But you see, the difference of opinion that we have is that you're talking about how we're going to respond to an incident. I'm trying to prevent it from happening in the first place. There are days, if LNG in today's environment, meaning no disrespect to my friends from Everett, in today's environment, there would be no way that an LNG terminal would be permitted new in Everett. We no longer are we're looking at a different environment now after after our problems with 9/11. We're looking at a different environment where we have to be smarter about how we introduce these potential terrorist sites into our communities. And we have a dense, and in some cases the most dense populations in the entire Commonwealth. We have to protect them from the incident, first to try to prevent, and then to intervene after the incident happens. But our first intention should be the intervention, it should be the prevention part. We'll deal with what we have to deal with when it happens, but let's be smart about making sure it doesn't happen in the first place. That's the perspective that I believe this report should be taken.
I think it's a very valid point about, how to handle it. What we did was look at other studies, other ethanol incidences, train accidents around the United States, and tried to understand what the response was there and what we can do to make sure we're following the same steps. And we have some of those studies here that we can talk about if that would help you guys understand what the evacuation procedures were and the areas that were evacuated and stuff on it.
Yeah, and on top of the evacuation, I would like to know who's going to be responsible for paying for all that evacuation, who's going to pay us to do that. But the question I have for all of you is, a train is running at a few miles an hour through Chelsea underneath Route 1, and somebody decides through a man-made activity that they're going to try to get a train to blow it up. How am I going to prevent that from happening? And if it does happen, what's the impact on the city of Chelsea and in the entire region's economic vitality when when Route 1 leading to Tobin Bridge is out for an appreciable period of time? There is no way, we can be prepared to respond to what happens, but there is no way that we're going to prevent along these miles and miles, hundreds and thousands of miles of rail lines, we're going to be able to provide the same security we do to the LNG tank, LNG shipments, where we have the Coast Guard go out into the inner harbor, meet them, inspect them, and then escort them in to the communities to protect them from acts of terrorism. We're not going to be able to do that. So no matter how well prepared we are for the response, the prevention is the most important part of this aspect, and preventing this from coming in is really what we need to be talking about.
That's exactly right.
And I'm going to speak up and not let anybody interrupt me this time. So I need to just talk louder, I guess. So
why did you look at it when you said that?
So basically, this might seem like an old point because I was going to make it 20 minutes ago. I'm very concerned as a city councilor in Chelsea and someone who lives 2 blocks away from those trains that I'm sitting here hearing that the city manager of my city isn't getting information from a person who's proposing to bring more items into the city of Revere that would go through Chelsea that would be, I would consider dangerous. Also with about like Roseanne, I have about probably 60 to 70 family members who live in that area. And I work in Cambridge Somerville area, so I'm pretty much always near that train track. So I'm very concerned to hear that basically the person who's running my city, I might not need to know some of this information, but to hear that he doesn't have that information, and especially with someone like Jay who's involved with the MAPC and those other groups at the level he is, that he can't get this information when he requests it. What is a new mayor, let's say if the mayor of Revere leaves and the new mayor comes in, how are they supposed to get this information? Or a new mayor in Everett, somebody who doesn't have those connections that Jay has. If he can't get this information, what chance do the rest of us have in the future? And that's my main concern, is we can lay out all sorts of plans, all sorts of diagrams, we can have charts up on the wall, but if we're currently not getting information from one of the parties involved that we need to be prepared, how can we trust that that's going to happen in the future?
Okay, I think you bring up a good concern. So I think that we can, as part of the study, identify the information, if you can be, or if you or Jay can be more specific on what you feel you guys are looking for and need, then we can, as part of this, look into how that information might be available, what other training procedures might be there, and then what isn't there, and how we can structure our conclusions and how we can recommend things to fill that gap. That's what I intend to do with this study. So thank you for your comment.
Because it is a severe concern. Like I said, 2 blocks away, my old apartment was literally a block away, so it's a big concern for me.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to move on to the next slide. And the next 3 slides are basically summarize our review of the existing crashes and derailments that we were able to find information on. And the first one is a summary of the rail crashes within the study area. So this is along the 4 lines that are in the study area. The types of train collisions or derailments that have occurred within the last 5 years. And so what you can see is that we've identified 3 crashes along the study rail corridors between 2008 and 2012. 2 of the crashes involved vehicles at highway rail grade crossings. One was at Spruce Street in Chelsea, and the other was at Broadway in Cambridge. And then 1 crash was a derailment, and the derailment was at the BET due to a, It was due to a storage box that became lodged under the coach and caused a slight derailment. Yep.
Paul, I know that you're just focusing on the study area, but I think that's unfair and unrealistic to just look at these 5 communities when all these trains are passing through the state on a regular basis. I know of 4 major incidents within the last 18 months. There was a commuter rail derailment last August 2012 on the Fitchburg line coming to Chelsea.
Yep.
There was a derailment there. There was a train derailment in Taunton in June of 2011. There were 7 freight trains derailed in South Amherst in May of 2011. And 12 rail cars tipped over after a derailment in Stockbridge in August of 2011. So those are 4 just in the last 18 months in Massachusetts.
Sure.
It's not fair, and I think it defeats the purpose of saying, oh, there are only these 2 major incidents, one in Chelsea, one in Cambridge, when there are other significant concerns for train derailments in the state of Massachusetts alone.
And the reason we're looking within the study area is because we need to look at the types of collisions and crashes that have happened there, so that we can understand some of the possible safety conditions along those rails, because it's within the study area. Now, we're not...
The entire routes. You can't just look at the study area and say, oh, there'll only be an accident in the study area. You need to look at all of the potential routes that this train is traveling down.
Well, it's not meant to say that, look, only these many crashes occurred. It's more meant to say, what are the potential safety issues that we'll face, and how can we then look...
How can you say that, though, Paul? If you're saying there are only these 2 minor incidents that happened, one in Chelsea and one in Cambridge, to completely avoid the 4 major derailments that just happened in the last 18 months, how can you just blank those out?
I'm not meaning to blank them out. I mean, if you feel that there's kind of 2 parts to that. What we need to do is we need to look at what's there to see if there's any conditions that can be identified within the study area. Then we've also included a screening of derailments and ethanol derailments nationwide. And that's meant to point to other issues that can lead to such large events. I'm not trying to ignore the ways that crashes can occur. actually, as part of it, I don't think that they cover everything that we need to look at. So I think we need to go a little bit further.
And we will look at
Right.
other incidents
Right.
that we are able to, throughout the Commonwealth, that we are able to find data on. We have good data for the MBTA service area, and we will provide that information. And we have, we will get as much information about other parts of the Commonwealth that we can. But the data, there are some areas where the data is simply not available.
I have data right here on
Yes,
Florida.
all you have to do is Google it. Just go on Google and you'll get all the information you want.
Sure, no, I mean, let us, what we're saying is that just sometimes, it depends on the quality of the crash report that's there, but we can take a
If the
look.
DOT doesn't have this data and doesn't include it in the study, there's something significantly wrong.
Well,
Significantly wrong. If
you
I'm just
also
a
have-
public person and I know of 4 major accidents in the last 18 months, and you at the DOT don't know that, then...
No, it's not that we...
Tracks in a different area, so we're looking in the study area because these tracks are reviewed and maintained and inspected in a different way that tracks outside the city are inspected, so we were trying to do a one-to-one comparison of what's in the area, how these tracks are maintained, how they're inspected.
But one of the major derailments that just happened 6 months ago was on the rail line where the freight trains would come on, the ethanol runs. So to exclude that even from this simple list for today seems ludicrous to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I would also argue that while the tracks are important to look at, there are other causes of train accidents. And so it's good that you understand what the tracks are in the study area, but we have to look at all the factors that take place. The causes, do you have any information as to how much freight, how many times a freight car is running through? Let's take the Chelsea, going through Chelsea. How many times a week a freight car going through Chelsea?
So what we've done is, you'll have to go back to one of the earlier slides, the one that shows the, the weekday operations. You'll see that we queried the MBCR keeps track of any freight trains that enter their territory, and we queried a month's worth of data. And what we found is that on average, on the different corridors, there's 5 trains. Was that a week?
Just one day.
One day. Okay, 5 trains a day. And that's probably on corridor 2, which is the CSX line. There's 2. And then on corridor 3, which is the Lowell line, there were 2 recorded per day.
And that corridor does not mean that it's going from the terminuses from one end to the other.
Right.
So,
No, it's just.
The reason why I raise this point is that I suspect there are a few freight trains going through Chelsea right now. Don't know that for sure. I'm going to make some suppositions now, not knowing the facts. Eddie, please go along with me.
I do.
If there are very few freight trains now, there are very few opportunities for freight trains to get into accidents now in my study district. So, to Roseanne's point, and to the points that the rest of us have made, I'll try to make in the last meeting, if you do not look at beyond the study area, your information is going to be skewed because there's nothing happening right now to study. It's especially important when we look at the hazardous cargo that is going through as well. So I have the point about the frequency, and I have a point about not only looking at just ethanol-related incidents, but any hazardous cargo-related incident, because there are so few ethanol trips going through Chelsea now that it would render the data useless.
Sure. And I mean, what we can do is you can look at the crash rates, and that normalizes it to the number that are coming in, so we can look at the crash rates. This was just kind of the first pass to look at the crashes that have occurred so that we could identify potential safety issues. Now, there were some that are identified through the look at the current study area, and then there are others that are identified through looking at some of the larger collisions that have occurred where there's more comprehensive evaluation by the National Transportation Safety Board and the FRA. So just to move on to that, so I think we can address your comment, but I just wanted to move on to the next slide so we can continue the discussion, because I think there's some important points that are brought up there. So the next slide, which is slide 8, you can see that we identified 8 ethanol derailments between 2006 and 2012. 4 of those derailments had FRA or NTSB reports available. The remaining 8, the reports are still pending, so we don't have the full information. But we were able to collect some information from media sources and the basic crash reports that it provided. And what was pointed to there was that many of the collisions, many of the derailments were caused by improper track inspection and maintenance and a lack of communication. One of the major events was located near Rockford, Illinois, and in that situation there was a washout of the tracks, which actually the railroad employees knew about but weren't able to communicate it for whatever reason to the train, and therefore it derailed at the washout. So, those are still important points too, and as part of the study, because they can lead to derailments, I want to make sure that we include that in our analysis. And then going one step further, those were the track inspections and maintenance and the lack of communication caused the derailments, but in many of those cases, what led to the actual release of the ethanol and the resulting fires or release of product, whatever it was potentially the train speed. A lot of the bigger collision, the bigger derailment issues occurred at train speeds over 35, 45 miles an hour. And also the part of it was the rail car design for the DOT 111, which is the tank car that's widely used to transport ethanol. And what they pointed to there is that the skins of those cars are relatively thin and often can be punctured by the couplings during a derailment. And that's something that has been recognized by the NTSB, and they've made recommendations to the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. So this assessment of ethanol derailments nationwide also shows some information that we're going to need to address as part of this report. Just to finish the review here, the event in Rockford resulted in a fatality because the derailment was adjacent to a grade crossing where one of the people that was in the cars at the grade crossing passed away. And then 2 events resulted in personal injury. One of the personal injury events was the Rockford one again, and then the other one was the an Ohio crash where 2 people coming to check out the collision were burned. And based on the reports, the average costs of damages in these situations was about $7.4 million.
Do you have an idea of the range?
Yes, it was just, one was $5 million and change, another one was $8 million and change.
So where it was reported, and most of that, so that's not a full sample of the 8, but based off the reports that were issued, most of that damage was to either the rails, the railroad property, meaning like the cars, the loss of the engine or whatever it was, and then also to the lost product. The ethanol itself had value, or anything else being shipped.
So we weren't in areas where there was a lot of damage to the surrounding?
Correct. Most of these were not in heavily populated areas.
Here I have for you, right here, 18 catastrophic ethanol explosions in the past 5 years. There they are right there.
Thank you.
17 of them. You've got dozens of people, hundreds working for your DOT. You come up with 5 in the United. I don't get it.
Yeah, is that at ethanol plants or is it?
Ethanol trains.
Ethanol trains.
All trains.
Between 2006.
Where evacuations were in the thousands throughout the United States. I sent him a note. Go on Google and pull up ethanol train explosions. You get all the information you want.
Do you have copies of
He
that?
comes up with 5 of them.
We'll take a look at the list.
Well,
Our research, we looked from 2000 to 2012, and we found 40 ethanol train derailments.
What's going on?
Derailments and incidents. So what I would like to see is, we're going to share that with you. We'd like to see that incorporated in the study. But I'd like to know the evacuation radius for each of the incidents that you're uncovering.
Sure.
The number of gallons of ethanol released, number of cars that exploded, and the speed of the trains when the incident happened. I feel like we need a much more detailed analysis than just a summary of the fact that there were 8, and again, we calculated 40.
Sure.
So we'll pass that on, and I'd like to see that incorporated.
We'd be happy to. Thank you.
And I think part of that kind of goes to the point that I believe the fire personnel brought up, and that was that need for that study, because like you said, most of these happen in rural areas. It would be interesting to be able to take one of those explosions and put it next to, let's say, the Mary C. Burke Elementary School complex, which is about 100 feet away from the trains, or in Cambridge or in Everett. And I believe that study would be useful because I'm not sure, you would probably know better than I would, but I'm not sure if there's been a major derailment of an ethanol train in a densely populated urban area.
Wait, in the
Not
United
nearly
States?
comparable to what would happen
Yeah,
here.
I'm talking about the density that we have here. There might have been
Yeah.
urban areas, but I'm talking,
Density,
like, we're
right.
talking like the most dense populated cities in the state. And in Chelsea, we're one of the most densely populated cities in the country.
10.
Exactly. So
Tenth of the
I
United
think that
States,
just kind of goes to show
God bless
we
you.
don't have the information, and that report would be useful if we could figure out.
I
a way to
agree.
do that.
I think that some of the weaknesses of it is that none of them really were in heavily populated areas. So, you know, if you have any information that you can share with me, I'd appreciate that.
No, so, but my point was to go back to the fire personnel, that I think we really need to look into a study like that, because since it doesn't exist, it needs to be created.
Right. Okay. Ed, do you have a question?
I just want to be sure that we include the first responders in this discussion, because each of the events I'm sure that you'll look at may be distinguishable.
I didn't hear what you said.
Each may be distinguishable.
What did you say?
Yes, if there was a derailment with a rail car going 80 miles an hour, I'm not sure that's particularly relevant to the information you want to look at.
Right.
Which is why we need that study.
No, that just means that if we want to look at separate events, you should look at each of the events to determine the underlying fact perhaps behind that event.
Sure. I think as part of any of the reviews, we're going to take a look at what what contributed to the derailments or the crashes, and figure out what's applicable to these areas. You know, one of the things that they, if you go to the next one of the ones I want to ask is that, you know, it seemed that one of the crashes in Ohio, the fire personnel had difficulty accessing the site, and I bet that's something that we're going to encounter here, but for a different reason. You know, there it was because there were just no roads that paralleled the tracks. Here it might be that there's constraints along, you know, you can't fit a fire truck down alongside certain places and drive on it. So we'll have to look into that as part of the study.
Well, I'd like to suggest that in addition to looking at the derailments, I think you need to include in your study what likely could happen if there was an explosion with the related industries around these areas. And I think that's something that could take place in the consequence modeling. But if there was an explosion in Everett, what's going to happen to the LNG tank? What's going to tank the facilities? What's going to happen to all these other facilities that are already high risks?
Kind of a chain reaction type idea? Okay. All right, we can definitely take a look at that.
Never get it in 12 days. 15 days, I'll tell you.
No, but we can recommend that it be done.
I'm with you all the way.
So I appreciate everyone with their patience. It's 10 past. We had one more item to cover, but that is the maps that I provided to everyone. Should have received a copy. If not, I can send them to you. And what they show are the routes that we are included in the study area with a half-mile buffer around them. And what I'm looking for the most is that you take a look at the facilities that are identified. We use basically the MassGIS website to get information on hospitals, schools, and other facilities like that. I'm asking you to take a look at the map, and if there's anything you feel is incorrect or in the wrong spot or missing, please let me know.
Are you including public housing facilities?
I
Are you including public housing facilities?
I don't think they're called out. I don't think they're called out specifically.
Because there aren't any on the map for Chelsea.
I'd only suggest that it's going to be up to us, the emergency management directors, to provide the facilities that are identified in our emergency management plans. And that would constitute elderly housing, nursing homes, things such as that. And it would be part of our consequences of what we develop in our regular emergency management plans, which we have identified, all of us, along railroad lines already. So we'll just give the input to Paul.
I think
Any population of
it
any
doesn't matter if
consequence.
it's public. I mean, any dense residential, yeah.
Apartment buildings, things such as that.
And also, above just the facilities on here, that we'll also be looking at just the total population within those zones too, so that would also be captured there. So with that, just please feel free to send me your comments via email. My email is on the last slide, if you don't have it already. And also my phone number's on there as well. Now, as far as other business, I think that, again, we need to schedule a lot of meetings coming up. So that's my next priority is to make sure that we can schedule all the meetings, including the next technical advisory group meeting. And I will be in communication with you all around that. And like, yeah, that's okay.
Just one last recommendation in terms of when we're looking at these evacuation plans, I think that we need to look at them holistically and not city by city. So if there was an accident in Revere and Revere has a really great evacuation plan that says come to Chelsea, then what happens in Chelsea and vice versa? Or how do we get out?
We have contingency plans for that. That's all part of the state requirements for it.
So I'd like to see
And in
that
particular,
in the study, because I don't have that information, and I'd like to see that in the study. So it could be an addendum. I'd like to see that because it's not publicly available.
Okay.
yes, it is.
We'll find out how you can get
I'll
access
give
to
you
it.
the link to, it's through MEMA and it's the ESEMS plans. They're all electronic. And there are certain things that are not allowed out in the public relative to certain issues, and some hazardous material situations. It's just, that's part of the new requirement for DHS. So there are plans out there. Every one of us is required to provide these plans for the community and for the state. So everything is there, and there is a lot of public access to it.
Can you just say that name again? MEMA what?
MEMA, and it's called ESEMP.
E-S-E-M-P?
ECEMP. What it is an electronic community emergency management plan.
Thank you.
Well, my last comment for the day would be that in the reverse order of concern, derailment is because of track conditions is my last concern. Accidents that happen because of operator error or vehicles going through intersections is my second most important concern. And my biggest concern just isn't being addressed by what I see here. And when I come back to the terrorism, act of terrorism, I just do not see anything in this, and perhaps this was your attention, today was only going to be to look at derailment. But I'm concerned because February 9th is right around the corner, that there doesn't appear to be any analysis at all about the exposure that these trains have to acts of terrorism and what the impacts could be. You're obviously not going to be able to go on the internet and find an example, I think, in the United States of a train being used, but maybe you can. But we do have evidence of enemies of this country who have had documentation about looking at trains as a way of creating major problems. So I'm wondering how you are planning on thinking about, and that's just my order, different people may have different orders, but I'm wondering about how you're planning on addressing the potential terrorist aspects of this when you look at the public safety implications of it coming to the plans.
Well, we definitely plan on incorporating it as part of Task 3 when we look at potential safety and security issues. Security is meant to cover terrorism issues and things like that, but we can go into more depth about what's in that. And I'll make sure that you get plenty of time to take a look at that and review it to your satisfaction.
I don't mean to be fresh.
Yep.
Plenty of time in the next 18 days.
Right.
Okay. That doesn't work. And again, I argue, and I think it's incumbent upon us all to reach out to everyone we can to talk about this date. You can't possibly give me plenty of time because you can't possibly come up with all of the terrorist information that you need to look at relative to this potential. And digest it, and spit it out to me so that I can digest it and be comfortable with it.
And I think that, I don't know, frankly, with respect to the, potential terrorist threats, I don't know. I don't think that this report is really going to be able to satisfy what you're looking for. I think that what we need to do is look at the potential consequences of whatever the cause of the incident may be. I think we need to take a look at the security and terrorist threat issues. But again, as you know, there hasn't been such an incident. I don't know what the base of data that we could use for such an assessment would be. I think that's, if that is something that could be identified as a, one of the issues to be undertaken in identifying, response planning for this. But again, I don't know that we're going to be able to do the kind of thorough terrorist threat assessment that you seem to be looking for in this report.
So the legislative intent was to look at public safety, and we assume that the legislature considers terrorism a public safety threat. The parallel, I guess, Ned, would be to look at what has transpired with the LNG facility in Everett, right in our backyard. And while I'm not aware that there were any incidents involving terrorism in LNG shipments, there was provisions made to protect those shipments coming in. And it seems to me that this is as dangerous, if not more dangerous, for our communities. And the uneven response on securing the shipments is something that strikes me is very unbalanced and needing to be resolved. So I would agree with you. I don't think, if you could figure out how to address the terrorism issues in 18 days, you're in the wrong department. But I do think it needs to be acknowledged, and I don't mean acknowledged in a line that passes somewhere in an executive summary. I think there has to be some real discussion that you aren't able to determine that, but you could look at the LNG facility and all the security it prefers, it directs to the shipments, and consider whether parallel precautions need to take place.
I think we ought to contact the Undersecretary of Homeland Security in the state of Massachusetts, appointed by the governor, Mr. Swartz. It seems to me that I'd ask you to send him another letter and have him come by. He's the Undersecretary of Homeland Security in the state of Massachusetts, appointed by the governor. I don't know why he's not here.
We have a plan now that's being drafted through the UASI group, Urban Area Security Initiative, Metro Boston one, and they just sent us a draft the other day, and it addresses a lot of what you're saying in a very generic way, but what the 9 communities within UASI would have to do and who they notify and everything like that. So I'll forward you that draft right now, and I'll forward it to you so you can look at it. Maybe there's some of that you can cull out that would maybe address some of those concerns. We're doing it now under the dictates of EOPS for the UASI region, in particular for a major consequence incident.
I just want to be clear, Chief, that there's the prevention and then there's the...
No, I understand. I
think I walk the Chelsea tracks quite frequently for a variety of reasons, and never has a soul stopped me from doing it. Now, either everybody knows me.
Well, you do have it.
But because I stand up, nobody calls and says, hey, what are you doing there? So I'm really concerned that somebody else, or I could be a rogue, after all these years. When I introduced John Powers, who just walked into the Revere City Council, just to make sure everyone knows that.
Could I have a copy of that also?
No.
All right.
Yes.
All right, with that, thank you everyone for coming.
It's a draft. I'm sorry, I can't release it to you. Right now, it's not a public document. I can release it to Paul, that he can cull things out of it.
Well, I'll get a copy from him.
I have one final comment.
Yep.
The frustration that we are expressing, we realize is not because of any of you state officials who are here right now. And so I want to make sure, and if anyone differs, please let me know. I feel that you are serving us well by doing what you're doing with the resources that you have been given. My criticism is that I think that the timetable is unfair and the resources that you have to accomplish your task is unfair. And I say that with the DEP officials as well. The DEP officials have regulations that they have to follow. So I hope I speak for everybody here that we very much appreciate how much work you're putting into this and do believe that you're putting an awful lot of work into this. Nonetheless, we're concerned that even with that, we're not going to be able to get to a point where we'll be satisfied with the results.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, we will work, we will talk, we'll work to try to figure out a way to make sure that we can all be satisfied if not